niggas talking they chick shit. When I see them, I'ma pull up and flex, bitch.
What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford. And you know what time it is? We're back for another one. Alright, y'all, let's get it in real fast. It's hot. It's another hot day. Been a long day. Now it's time for some boxing talk. Alright, the topic of the day is shook ones. Terence Crawford is ducking the Errol Spence contract for a mystery fight. Boots or Pacquiao? Oh boy, where's he going with this? What the H is he talking about? Alright, so why do I feel like Terence Crawford is avoiding or ducking or putting to the side or just not signing off on the Errol Spence Jr. undisputed super fight contract? At least not in 2022. Maybe 2023. But for now, I think Terence Crawford realizes, or maybe even Team Crawford realizes, if he wants a proper purse split, he has more work to do. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically he's not popular enough. He hasn't proven that he could sell pay-per-views at a high clip. He hasn't proven that he can fill a venue at a high clip, other than his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska. Now, he has work to do. Now, what work is out there for him to do? Because there's, let's be honest, in the welterweight division, it used to be the most stacked division in boxing. It's no longer the most stacked division in boxing anymore. I would say 130, 135 is the most stacked division in boxing now. There are great fighters and great fights to be made in that division. But there's still some good fights to be made at 147. Now, there's work Terence Crawford needs to accomplish. Now, there are fights, like I said, to be made at 147, but there are fights he should avoid and fights he should potentially be thinking about if he's not going to sign off on the super fight with Errol Spence Jr. And the fights I think he should avoid would be Keith Thurman, perhaps Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia. You know, completely pointless fights. Those type of fights would be completely pointless for Terence Crawford at this point in his career. Now, the work that needs to be done, the fights he should be thinking about taking, are fights like Virgil Ortiz, Boots Ennis, Sandonius, I hope I'm saying that right. And you have a big fish who's looking to re-emerge in this pool of 147 water in Manny Pacquiao. You know, a couple of weeks ago, you know, there was talk about Pacquiao possibly fighting Crawford if the Errol Spence negotiations broke down. And now we see that they have broken down completely, even though I knew, you know, from the start of all this talk that there wasn't enough money on the table for Terence Crawford to sign off. Not to say they can't fix it, but at the moment there's not enough money on the table for Terence Crawford to sign off on this fight. And in his mind, he's doing the right thing. In my mind, he's a little delusional because he has work to do. Now, if he was to take that Manny Pacquiao fight, what would that mean for him? You know, what would that accomplish for him, especially if he won? And what would be the end goal of that? Let me start off with Boots first. Because, you know, Boots is the IBF mandatory for Errol Spence. That doesn't mean Errol Spence has to fight Boots. Now, the IBF could push for that fight, or Errol Spence could go with a different opponent. I told y'all I believe Sandonius is one of those opponents, and I believe that Virgil Ortiz is the other one of those opponents for his titles. I believe that's how it goes. I think IBF, it's Boots. The WBA, it might either be Sandonius. I think it's Sandonius, and then the WBC, I believe, is Virgil Ortiz. Now, as far as the Boots fight goes, what that wouldn't accomplish for Terence Crawford is new fame. You know, unfortunately for Boots, he's becoming very famous. He's just not famous yet, you know, and he has stuff to accomplish himself. But what that fight would do for Terence Crawford is it would bring hardcore fans in to view that fight. And if he was to beat Boots, then he would gain a new allegiance with the hardcore boxing fans, because hardcore boxing fans, real boxing fans, know who Boots Ennis is, and he has his own built-in fan base, that Philly fan base that rides with him. So he would pick up a new portion of fans if he was to fight Boots and beat Boots. But what he wouldn't gain from that Boots fight is a lot of money and a lot of fame. But he would gain new respect, and he would get actually a pound. He would get not a pound for pound, but he would be bumped up in the IBF ranking. You know, I don't know if Boots is number 1, Terence Crawford might be number 2 or 3 in the IBF. So it would give him a boost up in the rankings. For, you know, it would almost make him mandatory. So any fight that would be made with Errol Spence would almost be a mandatory fight at that point. And, you know, the negotiations might go a little bit different. I still don't think he would get the price tag he wants, but the negotiations would go a little bit different because he would be mandatory at that point. Like I said before, he wouldn't gain a lot of money, but what another thing he would get off the Boots fight is he would be the A side, so he would get the larger portion of whatever pot of money would be offered to make that fight. So, you know, he would get some Philly fans if he beat him. He would get the A side if he beat him, and he would get the IBF mandatory position if he beat Boots. And then you go to the other side of the coin. What about Manny Pacquiao? Okay, so if he was to face off with Manny Pacquiao and beat Manny Pacquiao, then you start talking about instant fame. You start talking about becoming really, really famous, really, really well known around the world of boxing, not just in the U.S. boxing arena, but the world of boxing. Then you would have Terence Crawford's name ringing a lot of bells, and depending on how he beat Pacquiao, he would definitely gain a portion of Pacquiao's fan base. Now, as far as money goes, there was already a $50 million pot that was placed out there for Terence Crawford. Pacquiao was going to get 40, Terence was going to get 10. Now, is that pot of money still out there? Has it grown? Are they still interested because Pacquiao got beat by Ugas in making that fight? Obviously, there's somebody interested in making that fight, because there was talk of the fight being made if the Errol Spence Jr. Fight broke down. Now, how would that play out in favor of Terence Crawford? Okay, he would gain, once again, he would gain instant fame off of that fight. Because he is a champion, he would go into that fight as the A side. Even though Manny Pacquiao is umpteen times more popular and more famous than Terence Crawford, he would be the A side in that fight, which means he would get to pick the refs, the judges, the venue, and he would get the higher dollar amount. So whatever purse that would be put together for that fight, let's say they come up with $25 million or 30 million, then he would get the lion's share of that money. Let's say the split would be something like, let's say if they got 30 million, I think Pacquiao would want somewhere around 10, 12, maybe 15. He might actually give Pacquiao a first split on the money. So let's say they had 30, he might get 15 and Pacquiao might get 15 to make the fight. You know what I'm saying? And then he would get to pick the venue, the ref, the judges, and get a higher percentage of the back end money. But I think they would have to put up, Pacquiao's going to want at least $15 million, maybe even 20. So the pot of money would have to be pretty big, because I do feel like Terence Crawford would be the A side in that fight, based off he's a champion, based off he's been active. Pacquiao hasn't for the past few months. And those factors would make Terence Crawford the A side in that fight. Now, you could argue that, but those factors would make him the A side in that fight. And I think Manny Pacquiao would agree, as long as he was getting a set amount of money greater than $10 million. I think 15 to 20 million. Let's say they came up with 40 million. A 20-20 split would be a good split to make that fight. Crawford gets 20, Pacquiao gets 20, and then Crawford would get the higher end once again of the back end money, and he would get to pick the venue, the ref, the judges, all that other good stuff that comes along with being the A side. What if Pacquiao beat him? Oh boy, because you got to say the same thing about Jaron Ennis. I think Jaron Ennis definitely has the talent to beat Terence Crawford, but it's a big if, because that would be the biggest fight of Jaron Ennis' career, and it would be the biggest payday, I'm pretty sure, of his career as well. And a lot of guys that are great fighters, once they get all eyes put on them in those all eyes on me situations, they kind of freeze up. They don't know they don't perform as well. I don't think Boots would have that problem, but there's a possibility that when he gets the spotlight shine on him, that he doesn't perform to the same level. And it's a dangerous fight for both guys. It's a dangerous fight for Boots, because if he loses, he's already not popular enough yet it would take him some more uphill work to get back to where he was at before he fought and lost Crawford. And if Crawford lost, oh boy, does that throw a monkey wrench in everything. But it would elevate Boots, and Boots would be the happiest guy in the boxing world. Now, what about Pacquiao? Let's say Pacquiao beat him. What happens if Pacquiao actually beats Terence Crawford? We know what the matchmakers have said. We know, his chin's never been tested. It would make it very, very interesting. I'm pretty sure there would be a rematch clause in there, but then you know what that does? It kicks the Errol Spence fight out to maybe not until the end of 2023. So it would make things interesting. It would make for a lot of fanfare if he fought Pacquiao, and I think he would gain a lot of fans if he fought Pacquiao. He would gain a lot of money if he fought Pacquiao. And I think if you're going to hold off on the Errol Spence fight, you got to do something in the meantime. And if you were to pick between those two fights, which one, carries more weight, and which one brings me more money, which one brings me more fame, it's obviously the Manny Pacquiao fight. Even though I would love to see him fight Boots Ennis, and everybody would rather see him fight the young lion, but the young lion, his fame isn't there yet. So the dollar amounts would be way different, and the fame that he would gain from beating Boots is not as much as he would gain from beating a guy like Manny Pacquiao. So I think for now, I do feel like Terence Crawford is a little shook. He doesn't know what to do. He's in a funny position. He has a lot more to prove before he can get the dollar amount he wants from ESJ. And the Manny Pacquiao fight, I think, will put him in a much better position if he was to win. If he was to lose the Pacquiao fight, it's pretty much over. If he was to lose a Boots fight, it's pretty much over. But, if he goes in and loses to Errol Spence Jr. anyway, it's pretty much over. So, You know, I think the Pacquiao fight is winnable for Terence Crawford, but super dangerous. The Boots fight is winnable for Crawford, but super dangerous. But the Pacquiao fight, if he wins that one, comes with a lot more accolades to be gained and a lot more money to be had than the Boots fight does. Shook ones avoiding the Errol Spence contract. Let me know what y'all think about that down in the comment section. Do you feel like Terence Crawford is going to keep pursuing the Spence fight, or do you think he might as well go ahead and take another fight in the meantime, try to get some more fame, some more money, and try to even up the negotiating process by beating a guy like Pacquiao? Hit that like button for me. Please subscribe, tell a friend, share, all that good stuff. Holler at me on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube's. If you wanna, if you're on either of those other platforms, you can always hit me up on there. You're more likely to get a response on YouTube, though. It's your boy Cardinal Bud Crawfords. I think that's it for now, and we are here.
I'm blowing bands with an attitude, throwing racks at you like I'm mad at you.